Hi there, my name is Ales Ernecl. It's been a while since I had a English speaking guest. I've been focusing on Slovene politics lately, but here I am with my English speaking guest, Endeavor or Royal Endeavor. His YouTube channel is called Endeavor. Endeavor, thanks for accepting my invitation. It's a great honor.
Thank you for having me on.
Gladly, gladly. What I wanted to discuss with you first, first things first. Please present your YouTube channel and your what do you do? What are your streams like? What are the topics you mostly discuss? You're focused on cultural critique mainly, don't you?
Yes, so I do a few different things. I have some videos that are more focused on political science and like certain political ideas, ideology, different political philosophy, stuff like that. And then I also do a lot of cultural commentary. So I'm really into films, I'm into some books, and I'll make videos about certain movies that I thought had really interesting political themes. I have a ongoing series with Morgoth from Morgoth's Review, and each month him and I will pick a classic film and we'll do a live stream on that and talk about the various interesting political themes that you can find in the movie. So yeah, I'm into discussing culture, politics, history, and things like that on my channel.
Okay. Would you say, and when I ask this, I hope you of course, you're going to define your terms, but would you call yourself a right winger or left winger, or you wouldn't go down there?
No, I definitely call myself a right winger, certainly not a left winger. I think it's an accurate description. I know that many people will say that the labels of right and left are not so well defined anymore. I do think that the right and the left do exist in a very real sense. How you define them can change, but I do think that each of them have certain first principles um, that they do always conform to. So I do think that the right is about hierarchy and about order, and while the left is more about egalitarianism and liberation from a supposed oppression. And I do think that these are like running themes that you see throughout right wing and left wing thought. So definitely, I would identify as a right winger.
Um, but what would you say, for example, could it be that right wingers become revolutionaries in specific historical situations? For example, um, National Socialism or fascism is some kind of a revolutionary uh, ideology, isn't it? Although many of us would say that, of course, fascism and National Socialism were right wing, although that there are people that would call National Socialism and fascism left wing, especially mm, libertarians, probably. Or what's your opinion on this topic?
So I definitely think that a right winger can be well, it depends on how you define revolutionary, as in somebody who wants the current system to be overthrown and replaced with something new. That certainly describes me today. Um, so I do think that a right winger can want systemic change and very radical systemic change. I don't think that's necessarily means someone's not right wing. Um, so I guess if that in that sense they could be revolutionary. If we're talking about things like National Socialism or fascism, there's certainly right wing ideologies, in my opinion. While there might be certain things that perhaps they agree with some of the critiques of capitalism, but it's a critique of capitalism coming from the right. It's very different from the critique that would come from a Marxist, for example. So, um, in terms of somebody wanting radical systemic change, yes, I think it's a right winger can want that. I guess maybe, uh, though historically we've always thought of revolutionaries as being left wing. I think it really depends on what kind of systemic change they really want. And I guess also most revolutions, things like the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution, uh, at least the rhetoric that they push is a very like a left wing, a very egalitarian liberation rhetoric. And uh, what I'd say is like a kind of left wing revolutionary idea is that it's something that discards everything that came before it. I made this point in my video about the Gulag Archipelago, and I don't know if I invented this term, but a term I use to describe both Soviet Bolshevism and the current intersectionality in the West today. And I think this also applies to the French Revolution. The term I used to describe it, I said revolutionism, and what I meant by this term was an idea that everything that came before it was wrong, that everything had to be replaced. So that, like for instance, with the French Revolution, they believed that the monarchy, Christianity, all of France's history before that, all that was just oppression, and we wanted to institute this regime based on liberty and freedom and rationality and things like that. With Soviet communism, it was that all of history has been a class struggle, and we want to replace the oppressive capitalist system with a dictatorship of the proletariat. And then today, it's that the narrative is that, well, all of history has been racist and or white supremacist or whatever, and we need to destroy all of that and replace it with this kind of egalitarianism. So I think a right winger who would be someone who wants fundamental systemic change is not somebody who would fit that description. They wouldn't be somebody who wants to discard everything that came before it. It's not somebody who wants to start from like a new like ground zero. Like for example, in the French Revolution, when they started the date, they changed the calendar to get rid of the Christian calendar. They started like I think it was year one was the year of the storming of the Bastille, I believe. Uh, so someone like National Socialists or fascists from the early 20th century, uh, the idea wasn't to discard everything that had preceded it in history and start from a complete new. It was more just of a critique of the system that was in place at the time. So depends how you define revolutionary, but that's a long answer for a short question. But that's
Yeah,
what
no
I would
problem.
say to it.
How would you? What are the differences between the American mainstream right before the end of the World War II, and the modern uh, mainstream right wingers? They the party is called Republican Party. That the ideology is called conservatism. Would you tell our Slovene public something about how the right wing in America, at least the mainstream right wing in America, changed through last 60 years, and why, and how, if you're okay
Sure.
with it.
I just so everyone knows, I'm actually Canadian. I'm not actually American, but I think that it's you can pretty much apply the same logic to Canada because it's pretty similar. I think most fundamentally is the rejection of race, really. The this adoption of this kind of egalitarian worldview following World War II, that all humans are kind of just these interchangeable blank slates with that the only differences between them are really just superficial, and the reason that we have differences of outcome is because of oppression. So this is kind of the idea that was adopted following World War II, especially following the 1960s, is kind of this race blind, gender blind egalitarianism. With the right, I think that today there's a lot of major contradictions that a lot of people that would be that would fit into, say, the Republican Party in America today. A lot of them are really uneasy with a lot of the left's assertions, and rightfully so, about America and about race and about certain issues that they'll say that, well, America was a white supremacist country and it's 400 years of oppressing black people and women or whatever. And a lot of people would push back on that and say, well, they'd say, well, no, it's America was a free country and it's great, and we have our Constitution, and it's the best country on earth. But the major contradiction of that is that before the last like 50 or 60 years, even somebody that would have been nominally on the left at the time today would be considered a white supremacist. So they'll point to the founding fathers and the ideas they put in the Constitution, but the one major contradiction is that by today's standards they'd be considered to be more racist than Hitler. So you're leaving out this huge major factor in America's development as a nation over the first like 200 years of its existence. You're completely ignoring this one huge factor and adopting adopting a worldview that's kind of contradictory, because the realities of issues like race still exist. They still manifest themselves today, but what the left is doing is they're the ones who are trying to bring this egalitarian blank slate issue to its logical conclusion. So if, for example, there's this major disparity in income or crime rates or things like that among black people and white people within the same country, if it is true that everyone is just this interchangeable blank slate, and that race is just aesthetic and it has no bearing on any other human quality, then there has to be something causing that inequality. That's why the left, what they used to have was in the 60s, they would say, well, it was discrimination. It was white people being horrible, and that's what caused it. And they pointed to things like segregation. They pointed to things like they pointed to things like that, and they've always pointed to like the legacy of slavery. But today, like 50, 60 years on from that all being abolished, you still get the same disparities. In fact, some of them have even been more exacerbated. For example, I think that the gap between, now I don't know the exact statistics off the top of my head, but I think the gap between black and white home ownership or income is actually even larger than it was 50 or so years ago. And this is after 50, 60 years of policies designed to boost up black people, often at the expense of white people, and you still get the same disparity. So what the left is now saying is that it's institutional racism, this like word that they've wheeled out over the last few years, that it's just like, it's not that they can't point to any individual racists anymore. They say that it's just like in the air, kind of. It's just like it built into all of these institutions that's causing this. And they have to constantly come up with the more and more wacky conspiracy theories to justify this. But then if you're actually going to push back on that, you have to actually ask the question, is this assumption of equality even correct? And the problem with the mainstream right in America is that they are not willing to actually just speak openly and frankly about this issue of race. I mean, there's more to it than just race, but this is like the big one, or at least maybe until recently with the flu world order. But we can get into that later. They're not willing to speak openly about it, so you really just keep losing that cultural ground. And then the problem just keeps getting worse and worse. And I'd say the big difference between now and then is that today in American society, it's just impossible to actually take a dissenting view on this without having your reputation destroyed. So it's a huge problem that nobody's able to even discuss.
I remember that for a long time, the dissident right has been saying that because of this, what you mentioned, that the mainstream right is a blank slate right, that the Republican Party will never ever win an election again because in a couple of years or decades there will be so many non-whites in America that it will become impossible for the Republican Party to win because the majority of the voters of the Republican Party are still or were still white people or people from European descent. But would you say that lately, maybe, perhaps, the Republicans have been achieving some good points with minorities, or is this only illusion of watching Candace Owens and PragerU?
Um, so I'm not someone that really follows American electoral politics very closely, but from what I can tell, it's not a huge amount of difference. Like I'm pretty sure, I think like 20 between 2016 and 2020, Trump won a couple percentage points more of the black vote. I think maybe like percentage points more. I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but it's still not super significant. He won a couple more of the Hispanic votes, but even then, it doesn't look like they're going to be electorally successful once the demographics change enough, because uh, generally what it looks like is it's Hispanic. The Hispanic vote will be like maybe 60, maybe 66 to 33 in favor of the Democrats, and the black votes generally 85 to 90 to 10 to 15 in favor of the Democrats too. But I think, though, the even more fundamental issue than that is that even when the Republicans win, they don't actually get anything done. They don't actually push back on any of these uh, major issues. And like Trump was president for 4 years, we have more censorship, more wokeness, more mass immigration than there was a couple years ago. I mean, Trump maybe slowed some of that down a little. Maybe it would have been even worse had he not been in office, but fundamentally, you ended up in the same place. And uh, I'm actually kind of the opinion that it doesn't really that the electoral politics don't actually matter that much anymore, because I kind of think that even if you end up getting your party in office, uh, the people in power really get what they want. So I think that really it's not a democracy in any real sense.
What about the situation in Canada? I know it's not fair, but the things I know about Canada is Trudeau, Jordan B. Peterson, and that some of you guys speak French and some of you guys speak English. What's the political situation?
Well, basically, the globalists have 100% control over the country. So it's not even like in America where you'll have like states like, I don't know, Texas or Florida or Montana, where you'll get a governor who every now and then will pass a policy that kind of helps you out a little. In Canada, like even the Conservative Party is fully on board with globalism, mass immigration, anti-whiteism. uh, yeah, that's pretty much the political landscape. We have three different parties. One is Trudeau's party, the Liberal Party. Then we have the NDP, who are slightly to the left of them, and the Conservative Party, who are slightly to the right. But really, on all the fundamental issues, they are the same. They're all pro globalism. So, and then we really don't. Same with our entire media, our education system. They've pretty much have complete control over the country.
um, Liberalism. When you take the red pill and you go down the rabbit hole, and there you're being welcomed by types of political commentators from America like Dinesh D'Souza, Ben Shapiro, PragerU, and so forth. You you hear about liberalism, there are two types of liberalism. That there's on one side there is social liberalism, which is a left wing kind of thing, and that there is also classical liberalism, and that classical liberalism is basically conservatism, and it is basically a right wing thing, and is basically a very good thing. What's your opinion about or how do you view liberalism?
So, as in, how do I define it, or what is my opinion
Yeah,
on it?
how do you define it, and how do you comment on such um, differentiations as the libertarians do them?
So I define it as certain ideas that were adopted from like the age of the Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke or um, people like even Thomas Hobbes or Rousseau or Montesquieu, people like this. So I define it as a belief in parliamentary democracy, freedom of speech, a conception of human rights, constitutional rights, and various ideas like that. I made an entire series about it on my channel, so there's a lot to say about it. Now, in terms of like, what's the difference between progressive liberalism or classical liberalism? I think that they're the same in that they all agree on the same fundamentals. So they all agree that things like parliamentary democracy and freedom of speech and that human rights, a separation of church and state, the emphasis on reason, that these are all fundamentally good things. And then maybe they disagree on certain things here and there. But then, it starts to get a bit more murky when you bring it to the present day because nominally all these Western countries are liberal countries. On In theory, they're all democracies where the citizens are supposed to have human rights, but uh, I'm increasingly starting to think that that's kind of just an illusion. I made a video at the end of last year where I said it was titled "The Year That the Illusion of Liberalism Finally Fell," because I'd been making all these videos criticizing these ideas, and it's a lot harder to get. It was a lot harder to get a lot of them through before uh, the flu, the new illness that
Yeah.
we're not allowed to talk about on YouTube came in. But I think a lot since then, a lot of these presumptions that we had, at least from my perspective, have really shown themselves to be false. So it's hard to define. Is the West still liberal today? I'd say it's kind of moving into a post liberal era, but these kind of it's still like it is still nominally liberal, so they still rely on a lot of the same myths in order to justify the system.
by by asking yourself a question of whether the West is still liberalism, it sounds you imply that there are some intrinsically good things about liberalism. Which ones do you think are intrinsically good but can turn bad in praxis, for example?
So, well, hmm. I don't know if I don't know if I do think that there are that many intrinsically good things about him. I do think that it intrinsically is a bad ideology. I think that the biggest problem with it was that it was so easy to subvert, really, that over the last 75 years, um, a hostile world order has been able to conquer Western civilization without firing a shot. So I'd say that's like the biggest problem with it. Um, Although when I say that, when I say that, that we're kind of moving into a post liberal order, are there certain things that would be helpful for us today? For example, uh, like free speech. I run a YouTube channel. I don't want to be thrown in jail for expressing my political views. So, to an extent, yes, I do believe in free speech. However, there are the downsides to free speech. Like, there's the downsides are that it allows your enemies to openly call for your subversion, and then actually even possibly overthrow you, and then once they're in power, deny you that same right. And I think that's what's happened. But I mean, from our perspective, from the perspective of the dissident right today, having free speech is better than not having it. So like I can have my critiques of the idea of absolute freedom of speech in abstract, but I mean, having that would be very useful for us today. But I think it's becoming more and more clear that we do not have that. I mean, for God's sakes, in America, they're saying that that parents who protest critical race theory and transgenderism in their children's schools, that these parents are being labeled terrorists. It's really quite incredible. But I think that the illusion that we really had freedom of speech, which I would contest that we really haven't had that in a real sense for a very long time. But even that illusion is starting to evaporate.
Would you say that liberalism has its roots in Christianity? Is it Christianity that made European civilization or Western civilization or American civilization so vulnerable, or
Um, no, I wouldn't, because Christianity existed for 1700 years before liberalism, roughly. It existed for a very long time. The Middle Ages were not liberal. Um, and at the same time, I think that uh, a lot of uh, a lot of Christian values, I think, kind of kind of helped liberalism for a long time not devolve into what it's become today. For example, the idea of, like, the Christian idea of marriage and of morality and things like that. Like, there's nothing in if you look at something like I don't know, if you read John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, uh, if you're coming at that from a purely secular perspective, um, a purely materialistic one, I don't really see the argument against things like transgenderism and stuff like that. Or I don't really see the arguments against, really, like the radical feminism. Actually, John Stuart Mill himself was a feminist, but what kept that in check is that we kind of had this value system which predated liberalism, uh, and people still believed in these values. I mean, the Enlightenment happened in the 18th and 19th centuries, but people still believed in Christian values up until the 1950s and the 1960s. So we still had that keeping it in check. The other thing I will say is that, do I think that Christianity made the West open to subversion? I don't think so either, because I mean it was, again, there was the religion of Western civilization for 1600 years. We didn't get subverted in that time. Uh, it's something that's only happened very recently. And at the same time, I think any religion, any set of ideas can be morphed in order with enough political pressure to just fit the zeitgeist of the present day. So when you see the churches today with the LGBT flags or the Black Lives Matter flags or something like that, and that's the result of this institution giving into it's this institution submitting to political might, really. And I think that can be done with any religion. So even with Islam, for example, people will say, well, Islam's a more conservative religion than Christianity. But I mean, I don't even know if that's the case either. I think with enough political might leaning on it, you could get a progressive Islam. A lot of Muslims who move to the West, maybe their parents are like these hardcore traditional Muslims, but then their kids, maybe they still identify nominally as a Muslim, but they kind of just use that identity as victim points in the intersectional stack. So a lot of people, like, there's a group that kind of does annoy me, is like the neo-pagans on the internet. Not saying that everyone that follows those ideas is a terrible person, but the thing that does annoy me is there's kind of this section of the internet that I don't really know what they do other than just complain about Christianity. Um, I wish they would actually, practice their own religion. If I could respect someone who actually did that, but uh, like there's also there's pagans that are SJWs as well. Like I saw this video of these guys saying that this is my Thor hammer and I'm an anti-racist or something like that. So any set of ideas can be conquered and morphed by political might, and I think that's really what's happened to Christianity. I don't think that progressivism and the decline of the West was built in. If the poison takes 1,500 years to kill you, then it's obviously not a very good poison.
Yeah, I've been having these discussions with the so-called neo-pagans, and here in Europe and in Slovenia, it's even harder to discuss with them because they seem, at least prima facie, to have the harder case for their thesis about Christianity, that it helped make us vulnerable because, for example, nationalism in Europe has from has for a long time been ethno-nationalism, which is not such a problem or even a thing in Canada or America, probably because you've been uh, enjoying the multiculturalism for a while now, and both of your countries haven't been um, majority white or majority white for a while now. But in Europe, we fight for our mm, ethno states, not just our states as in the sense of civic nationalism. And here, the neo pagans have been saying that you cannot be simultaneously a Catholic and ethno nationalist, although I am. I consider myself a Catholic and ethno nationalist, for example. By ethno nationalist, I mean, uh, for example, in 91, Slovenes, ethno Slovenes in Slovenia have been 80% somewhere at the end of the communism that was supposed to ruin ethno nations like Slovenes, Serbs, Croats, and so forth. We were 80%. And nowadays, some of my friends have made these measurements because the government forbade for us Slovenes to count ourselves. We're somewhere around 54% in our own country. So we're going to be a minority in 10 or 20 years, for example, ethno Slovenes. And
Wow.
yeah,
Who
what
are
do
the
you
other
get?
who are the other groups that make up the population of Slovenia?
Serbs, Muslim Bosnians. I think still the majority are Muslim Bosnians, Bosnians, Serbs, and lately Kosovo Albanians. And for example, um, the mainstream right wing party in Slovenia, I've been a member for years, but I'm not anymore, and now we've become some sort of antagonists, has been guilty of inviting and bringing many Kosovo Albanians into Slovenia, and this have been lately this has been lately a cause of our antagonism, the main cause of our antagonism. For example, we've been calling them um, Shqiptarophiles because the Albanian word for Albanians is Shqiptar, and we've been calling the main right wing party Shqiptarophiles because they like them. They are so. Anyways, I never had problems with me being Catholic and ethno nationalist. By ethno nationalist, I mean, well, I think it's only normal that if a country like Slovenia has a nation like Slovenes have become their state because they decided for it, and the state is somehow, um, how should I say, the main substance of the state is the Slovene nation, and by that I mean that Slovenes have to remain a majority in its own country or in its own state. By this I mean ethno-national. In this sense, I'm an ethno-nationalist and a Catholic, and I don't see any problems, but the neo-pagans see it. Do you see any problems?
No, I don't, because I don't think that, like, again, I think this is the problem of superimposing the zeitgeist of the present day onto a belief system that long predates it. Um, People before the Second World War would have had no problem being traditional Catholics and believing that Slovenia belonged to the Slovenians. I
Yeah.
don't see the contradiction there. That's something that would have been that would have been in place for years before that. And what I will just say to the neo pagans, like, I don't want to knock them too much, because I can respect someone who actually does practice the religion, but like I just find, like, on at least the ones on the internet, none of them. The only thing I ever hear about from them is how terrible Christianity is. I think, like, what's whatever religion, if they actually genuinely believe this, because I don't know anyone who actually practices one of these religions. But if you genuinely believe that, what's stopping your vision of the world actually coming about is not Christianity. It's globo homo. It's the globalist system. Really, that's what's getting in the way of it. The idea that you're going to get rid of Christianity, and that's how. I mean, haven't these countries already gotten rid of Christianity, more or less? I mean, they're still Christians, but like that's certainly not the dominant cultural force anymore. So, what I just say to someone like that is, your enemy is not Christianity. Your enemy is globo homo. Really, that's what's preventing you from actually practicing this religion, if you actually genuinely believe that. Which I I mean, a lot of them I know are just kind of LARPers who just say this on the internet, but I don't know. I mean, I know that there are some people like Survive the Jive who actually does interesting work on this stuff, and I can respect that. I'm a Christian myself. I don't believe in paganism, but if somebody actually wants to create culture based on that, I mean, okay. I mean, I find the myths interesting. I find that kind of culture interesting. I don't believe in it, but it's a cool part of our history. Thing is, though, I just kind of wish. I kind of just don't really have much respect for the internet LARPers, though.
Yep. The interesting thing, Boyan has said here that the nations that have been coming here have been known to have an average IQ of 85, and Slovenes at least till 90, 98, 91, excuse me, have been known to have an average IQ of at least 100. Similarly to Austrians, Slovaks, Czechs, and so forth. And it seems that lately the average IQ has in Slovenia has been falling under the 100, and it seems to be a an effect of those people coming here.
Yeah, and I guess on the issue of liberalism, is the problem with it now is like there's no liberal solution to any of that. How do you fix this major existential crisis through liberalism? You really can't. I mean, you have to, first of all, make distinctions between different groups. You're going to have to do that eventually if you're actually going to preserve any kind of livable society. And you're going to have to use things like the state. You're going to have to probably go against a lot of the certain liberal rights and certain liberal values that we've had in place for a long time. Though, to be honest, the powers that be have no problem doing that themselves anymore. But yeah, the problem is that liberalism doesn't offer any solutions. So even if you could make the argument that and this is a legitimate argument. Some people have said, well, liberalism works when it's a homogenous European society. So like it worked for England in the 19th century, which, to an extent, yes, it did. I still think my criticisms of it are still valid. I do think it still has had problems. However, we don't live in that context anymore. So, it's something that doesn't really offer us any solutions today.
Mm, okay, the next thing I wanted to discuss with you is because you made a excellent video about it is your critique of enlightenment. Because guys, it seems even with the so-called neo-pagans that the majority of their critique of Christianity comes out of this era, if I may say so, out of this era of enlightenment. They've been copying or believing the arguments of enlightenment thinkers. What's your take on enlightenment? Of course, a lot shorter than your video. I welcome all my viewers to watch your video about the critique on enlightenment.
Well, I think that like the biggest problem overall is the belief that you can even enlighten humanity, so to say, that you can actually fundamentally change human nature and create like that you can fundamentally change human nature through education and things like that. I think that's the biggest problem. Uh, I think that the same kind of human nature exists today that's always existed. You can build a better society. You can build one that people are less violent, the one that people are more prosperous. But I think that the same tendencies always will exist. I mean, this is an idea in Christianity, the idea that humanity put Christ on the cross, and that kind of sin is always going to be in us. We're always going to be capable of committing the worst kinds of evil. I think that's probably maybe the most fundamental problem with liberalism and enlightenment is the idea that you even can really change human nature.
Mm, do you think there will be time in the nearest future when the mainstream right-wing parties will embrace this kind of critique of enlightenment, or um, because I'm coming from my own experience, because our Slovene mainstream right-wing parties are all enlightenment great, liberalism great, communism down. What do you think is a bigger threat nowadays to the nations? Sort of say liberalism or communism?
Well, I think that I don't think it's either. I think it's globalism. I think that what we're up against is something that's new. Um, I think that communism is kind of a thing of the past. You can point to certain Marxian elements of the left today, but I don't think it's accurate to say that really anybody today is a communist. Even people who talk about like class struggle on their on their monetized YouTube channels with a million viewers, they're all just like normal liberal consumers, just like everyone else who love McDonald's or whatever, or Starbucks. So I don't really think that communism is a political force at all anymore. I mean, in fact, one thing you'll see with them is that they don't care so much about your views on economics as much as they care about your views on things like race and gender. That seems to be much more important for the left today than any of the economic things. So I think communism is kind of a thing of the past. I don't really think it's a threat today. Uh, so liberalism, I think that the problem with it over the last couple decades is that it's opened us up to subversion, and it's been used by our enemies to basically subvert our societies and uh, bring them in a direction that is fundamentally hostile to our interests, to the interests of white people across the world, and the long term health of our civilization. I'd say the biggest threat overall is globalism. So if I had to say between communism and liberalism, the threat from liberalism is kind of that it can blind us to the realities that we're actually living under today. So the idea that we are still actually living under a democracy that this might be a bit different in some other countries. So I know that it's not the same in all of them, but if we're talking about Canada, America, Britain, like the idea that we can vote these people out of office, or the idea that we actually have like these human rights, this abstract metaphysical set of rights that are going to protect us from government tyranny or from any kind that are going to protect us from this regime. This is the threat from liberalism right now. It's kind of deluding us into thinking that we have a position of strength and that we have certain rights that will protect us when we really don't have that available. But the ultimate threat is globalism. I would say it's the force of the force that breaks down the nation states, that wants to break down cultures and break down nations and replace European derived groups in their homelands. I think that that's the biggest threat that we face right now. And I think that it's taken a much darker turn in the last year and a half, especially. It just seems like so much more aggressive with this new, so-called pandemic that's going on, and this new climate agenda that they're trying to push through now. So I'd say that that's the biggest threat. It's globalism, really.
When I was a little libertarian, I I used to listen to people like Slavoj Žižek and Varoufakis and all Noam Chomsky and all these lefties, and they would talk about capitalism, and I would never hear them define the goddamn thing, and I would always go really mad about it. And after that, I used to listen to some Catholic critique of capitalism, and I would still get similar problems. The goddamn thing would just not get defined well enough in my terms. How do you define capitalism, and how do you see the capitalism's role in globalism and with everything that's happening to us right now?
Well, I think that I kind of have the same problem as you. Is that, like, what does capitalism even mean? Does it just mean that private businesses exist, that there's a market economy? Well, then, if that's the definition, then everything that's not like fully state run planned economy is capitalism. But then how does somebody define socialism? Does socialism mean that the state controls absolutely everything? But then that would mean that anything that wasn't just, Ayn Rand, ANCAP, uh, land, everything, then all that is socialism. So, the problem with it is that they're really terms that don't really make much sense, especially not in the modern day. I kind of think that, like you said we talked about at the beginning with right and left. I do think that the terms right and left are still relevant. I don't think that terms like capitalism and socialism are very relevant anymore um, because you could look in the 1930s, but at the difference between, say, the USSR versus the United States, like one of them's capitalist, one of them's socialist, and that's like a legitimate political divide right now. But I don't think that that is the divide that's going on right now. So what if I had to put a definition on capitalism? I'd say that now I know that this isn't really a definition that most people use. Usually they say it's like a free market economy, but I'd say that, like, at least a functional definition would be maybe the idea that maximizing the GDP per capita is the highest goal of a society. So maybe that, like, the more material wealth that you're getting, the better. I know that that's not really a definition of capitalism per se, but if we're gonna uh, kind of define the term in a way that actually seems to describe a reality today, then I'd probably say kind of this idea that GDP is the most important thing for a country, that raising the GDP is the highest goal. Because that's something that actually does exist today, and that actually is a problem. And the problem with it would be that it really discounts all these other aspects of society. So it gets rid of people's religion, their ethnic identities, their traditions, their communities, and all the other things that actually make people's lives valuable. It kind of just views the it kind of just gets rid of all that and says, well, the best thing for your life is just have more stuff. And I think the problem with that is that doesn't actually lead to a fulfilling life. So in that way, I'd say that that's how capitalism, if we want to define it as the GDP worship, that's the biggest problem with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is a fine definition because we get to define the main one, or at least one of the main problems, and yet we get to leave libertarians to say that this is not true capitalism and we're all happy. Um, one of the last things I wanted to ask you was this is probably the problem we all right wingers all over the Western world have. How harsh do you think we should define of who who should be our ally in our struggle? For example, because I've noticed by I've noticed myself lately that I've been um, I've been eliminating all sorts of people out of my out of my ideal ally bag. I've been noticing, for example, that lately that Putin is not a right winger anymore for me, and Viktor Orban, who's been considered extreme right wing by mainstream media in Europe, is not a true right winger for me anymore. How do you um, think about this problem of being perhaps too harsh and not finding any true allies anymore, or at least enough allies anymore?
Well, I guess I would say that somebody who is fundamentally opposed to the current system and wants something and kind of wants to replace it with something that would make life more fulfilling and more happy for us, and that would lead to our civilization having a longer and more prosperous future. I'd say that that's someone who I'd consider an ally. Now I know that's very vague, um, but I guess I just look for people. How fundamental is their critique of the system? How dissident are they in a real sense? So um, I don't really know where you draw the line. You can't really. It's hard to say. I also think that maybe on you don't need to. Someone doesn't need to be 100% an ally and 100% an enemy. So when someone like say Tucker Carlson says something that we agree with, I think you should give him a thumbs up on social media, maybe share it with some of your friends. I don't think there's any problem with doing that. And then maybe, when he says something that we disagree with, then maybe write in the comments that I disagree with this. I think that, you can, I don't think you're ever going to find anyone that agrees with you on 100% of 100% of issues. So I think you pretty much just need to look at who's actually pushing a message that's actually dissident, that actually is pushing towards something that we actually want to bring about, and to what extent is this person in the pockets of the globalists, and to what extent is this person working against us? And I'd say look at it kind of on a balance there. So sure, when somebody like that says something that you agree with, then on this issue you can say, yeah, I agree with you on that, and then when they say something that you disagree with, then just push back on it. So it is hard to find, and I do agree it's very hard to find allies in the current system because, unfortunately, it's just so powerful. The force of globalism is just so powerful. Like you just look at the money behind something like that COP26 conference that went on this week, and those people, they control all the money in the world, and just the one thing you'll notice is that this system's like ability to force people into conformity to it is pretty strong. So it's hard to find them, but I'd say whatever pushes you towards the ultimate goal.
Okay, something to laugh about at the end. Um, would you say that there is anyone in the world that is a bigger champion of globalism than yours truly, Justin Trudeau?
Is there anyone who's a bigger champion of globalism?
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe George Soros, Bill
Well,
Gates, Larry Fink, uh, Klaus Schwab. I I'd say that they're probably bigger champions of globalism. I think they're probably putting more into it. I do think that I do think Trudeau is kind of he is kind of just a puppet for them. Like one thing you notice in his interviews is that he's just saying what whoever it is he's taking orders from, uh, whoever's above him, he's just saying what they want him to say, and it's really weird because he's kind of like become this like catchphrase dispensing machine where and he's really dumb as well. Like Trudeau is very low IQ, so um, sometimes he'll like let the cat out of the bag. So for example, the "Build Back Better" slogan that the World Economic Forum came out with, uh, we started to see this everywhere, and then people started to notice it, and then the mainstream media said, "Oh, it's a conspiracy theory," and then Justin Trudeau came out and said, "Build back better," and like, "Oh, look, he's using the phrase," or he used the phrase "the Great Reset," and he kind of just is the one that like lets these psyops out of the bag a bit too early. Um, so I'd say he definitely is a symbol, probably the one of the best symbols of globalism. A beta male, pathetic cuck who will just say whatever they want him to say on any given issue. It's like one of his speeches. Just think of the words climate, indigenous, COVID, diversity, and equality, and just mash those up, and there's a Justin Trudeau speech for you. But I think there's people above him though that are really his handlers that he's subservient to.
okay. Um, thank you, Endeavor. Thank you
No
for
problem.
accepting my invitation. It's been a great honor. I hope I can invite you again
Sure.
soon to talk about some other topics. Thanks for all the viewers. Thanks for all the commentators. And this is for now from me. Oh, good night and good evening. And it's probably afternoon in Canada and in America. Um, thank you. See you. See you soon.